Welcome to the Tech Talks Daily podcast, where you can learn and be inspired by real-world examples of how technology is transforming businesses and reshaping industries in a language everyone can understand. Here is your host, Neil C. Hughes.
Welcome back to the Tech Talks Daily podcast. Now, at the end of every episode, I always ask listeners to send in their questions, their takeaways from every episode that they listen to. I also offer any listener anywhere in the 165 countries that all listen to this podcast an opportunity to come on here and use this platform to share their insights and expertise. Occasionally that confuses people, and I often get emails from people saying, "Do you really mean that, Neil?" I think it's quite telling that when people genuinely want to help each other, others think, this is a bit confusing. What's this guy's angle? But if I'm completely transparent with you, although I've recorded over 1,000 podcast interviews and tech leaders from Sony, Microsoft, Adobe, IBM, don't get me wrong, that is all incredibly cool and will always be grateful for those kind of opportunities. But there is so much more to the tech community than that, and that's something that I never want to lose sight of. Because there are so many startup founders that are working around the clock and riding that startup roller coaster ride of tremendous highs and dramatic lows. And it's those journeys where there is so much value, because all the learning and all the value is from that moment in time. And I think very often we just look for value and lessons in the success. But of course, there are no lessons in the success. It's in that grind before. And I think there is so much expertise out there with every single person listening. And I honestly think it's my job to make those voices heard, because there isn't a platform out there. I know from writing tech columns that editors straight away will be, I don't want to hear about a particular company, do a list instead or something like that. There just isn't a platform for guys like you and me to get those voices out there. And that's why I originally started this podcast. But I am booked up for the rest of 2019, and I've got 10 episodes booked in, which essentially cover me for cancellations right up to New Year's Day. But keeping a few spaces aside for you listeners is something that I will always do. But not in a buy my product or service kind of way, but much more of a, here is my story, or here is my area of expertise and how it could help your business. I want to get those kind of voices on here. Oh, speaking of which, we just got a virtual voicemail coming in. Shall we check it?
Hi, Neil. This is Taryn Southern, and I just wanted to say congratulations on your 1,000th episode. So exciting. Congrats.
Taryn Southern is one of my big heroes in tech, and I cannot thank her enough for sending that in. And if you are unaware of her work, please check it out, because she's an absolute inspiration to me. She's been on this podcast 3 times now, and she's enhancing almost every single area of creativity with technology. She's an AI artist, futurist, storyteller. And her documentary, I Am Human, is incredibly fascinating. And she even created an album using artificial intelligence and used 360-degree videos to promote the album. And royalties were managed through cryptocurrencies. I think it was Ethereum that she used, but I love what she's doing there. Sorry, I got a little bit sidetracked, didn't I? Never check your voicemails mid-podcast. That's my best advice to any wannabe podcasters out there. But in a nutshell, I just want our community to help each other through storytelling, sharing tech expertise, or offering value, and ultimately showcase tech talent from all over the world and not just the Bay Area. So when Debesh Choudhury contacted me saying, "Neil, would you be interested in talking to me about identity crisis and the future of password security?" I agreed instantly. But enough of me rambling on. Let's go all the way to India so we can speak with listener and friend of the show, Debesh Choudhury, where we're going to talk today about passwords, pins, biometrics, facial recognition, and much more. So a massive warm welcome back to the show, Debesh. I can't believe it's a year since we last spoke, but for anyone that missed our first conversation, could you just tell the listeners a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Thanks, Neil. I'm very happy to be on your podcast for the second time. I am Debesh Choudhury from India. I am an academician and researcher of information security. I provide solutions for privacy protection, digital identity, and cybersecurity.
And all those areas are such hot topics at the moment, especially around privacy, facial recognition, biometrics, and it's dominating conversations both online and offline. So the question I would love to ask you as we start this is, do you think we can live safely in a cyber age without secret credentials, say, such as passwords? Because I know there are so many companies trying to remove passwords now. But what's your opinion on that?
It is indeed true that secret credentials are indispensable in the internet-driven cyber life. Can we live without them? The answer is very simple. No, it is not possible to live without them. Till date, the text passwords and PIN are the most commonly used form of secret credentials. We need those whenever we need to log in to check our email, use our online bank accounts, or log in to any online account.
And I don't want to go too deep so early on in the podcast, but do you think the concept of passwordless authentication can be consistent with the value of democracy?
The passwords give us the power of login to our online accounts by our own wish. If I don't want to log in, then I won't give the password. Or if I enter a wrong password, then I will be rejected by the system. The concept of passwordless authentication is being discussed nowadays. Then my own permission or wish is not necessary for authentication of my login. I will get automatically logged in. It is dangerous to activate passwordless authentication because then it no longer requires to validate my democratic wish for login. The authentication system must be able to prioritize people's privacy and consent.
And of course, in India, there is a huge biometrics database. So do you think we can be certain that biometrics doesn't bring down security if you're starting to put the whole nation or entire nations online and using those biometrics?
Yeah, this is a very important question. The concept of passwordless authentication is promoted by the use of biometrics, which brings the personal identifiers within the human body, such as fingerprints, face, ID scan, etc. Biometrics is proposed to be used with a text password or PIN as a fallback system. If biometrics is more secure than text passwords, then how come text passwords are recommended to be used as a backup measure in case of biometrics failure? Isn't it self-contradicting? Now, liveness detection of biometrics is bringing some smile on the faces of promoters of biometrics-only authentication. If liveness detection fails, what would be the security? Moreover, liveness detection can help the criminals to force a victim to provide biometrics such as face, fingerprint, palm vein patterns, etc. to the authentication camera and sensor. We can infer that text passwords are more secure and safe than biometrics for online authentication. Do we forget that convenience is the weakest link in security? We can think about security ability and convenience as two conjugate variables. The abstract values of both cannot increase simultaneously. They are not parallel, they are orthogonal to each other. If the convenience factor increases, there will be an associated decrease in the security ability. Therefore, security ability and convenience factors bear an uncertainty relationship. I guess there is a resemblance of the well-known uncertainty principle of Heisenberg.
It's such a complex issue because we've all got, if you start looking at our iris and fingerprints, they are very personal and private to ourselves. And if they were to ever get out there, then you've completely lost everything. But one of the things over here, of course, is GDPR. So another question I've got to ask is, what do you think the impact of using biometrics on GDPR or other privacy regulation can help with? Is there anything or any problems that you see around that?
Biometrics is a threat to privacy. As a consequence, it is also an issue to comply EU GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulation, and other privacy regulations. The EU GDPR laws protect the citizens from having their biometric data shared or stored with the third parties without their explicit consent. In the US, some states will be starting to regulate the privacy of biometrics. Therefore, the people have to delegate the authority to the service providers for using their biometrics. If there is any data stealing or breach, there is a lifelong problem. As in case of Indian National Identity Project Aadhaar, the entire biometric database has been leaked and available in the dark market for a small Indian rupees. The security of Aadhaar data is now in the hands of the criminals.
And I think when I look at any emerging technologies, whether that be blockchain, artificial intelligence, biometrics, facial recognition, I think very often it feels like we're nothing but small children playing with these incredibly powerful toys, but blissfully unaware on the future implications or the dangers that we're playing with. So I've got to ask, I mean, do you think the world is rushing in with biometrics only authentication without thinking about those consequences?
There is a serious misconception about biometrics. People think that biometrics may be a threat to privacy, but it should be tolerated because biometrics is good for better security. But it is not true. This is completely wrong. The fact is that biometrics is less reliable than traditional text passwords and PIN. Biometrics is also highly vulnerable to data breach or hacking-induced spoofing attacks. There is a temporary solution by liveness detection that can act as a spoofing filter, but there are plenty of examples of biometric spoofs which defeat the liveness sensors.
And do you think there remains a distinction between a user and a device authentication?
Yes, there is a difference between an user and a device authentication. When devices are connected in the internet and applications are remotely accessed or controlled, then security in the devices becomes a requirement and authentication of devices comes into play. The device identity is the device ID, such as its MAC address, which has a similarity with the user ID, such as usernames. But device IDs cannot be changed by the user. The password can be manually put by an user or saved on the device. Pre-saved password on the device is very risky. If the device is stolen or lost, then the data associated with the device login will be under continuous threat. This applies to the biometric data saved on the cell phones for easy access of online accounts.
And if we look at the text password, I mean, does that represent the entire domain of secret credentials, do you think?
Yes, there can be several classes of secret credentials. Text passwords is one type of secret credential. So are the secret PIN or OTP one-time password. We may refer to any book or password for a reference. The easier a password is for the owner to remember generally means it will be easier for an attacker to guess. Memorability and security of a password depends on many parameters. If the password is long and complex, it is difficult to memorize. If it is too simple, it is easy to be guessed by automated programmatic hacking. Since text passwords are hard to remember, there is another way of doing it. Instead of text, a picture on an image can be used as a password to authenticate a login. A question arises, are graphical passwords as secure as text passwords? The simple answer is, graphical passwords are more secure than text passwords.
So if I was to play devil's advocate for a moment, why don't we look at the possibility of making use of our non-text memory, autobiographic memory such as episodic memory in particular, especially as a key component of those secret credentials?
We have a huge memory capacity for non-text memories. Visual, audio, tactile, gustatory, olfactory, which have supported our history over hundreds of millions of years. Besides the text memory humans acquired hundreds of years ago among the large parts of the population. Why don't we think of making use of these deep inscribed memory capacities, particularly the visual memories? We know that the latest computers and phones are good at handling visual images. The phones have cameras. Among the image memories, we could focus on the images linked to our autobiographic memory, the episodic memory in particular. Those can connect to some incidents of our memorable past. The idea of using pictures for passwords is not new. It has been around for more than 2 decades.
So in your opinion, what are the strengths of episodic memory-based authentication, such as visual or graphical passwords? Is there any particular strengths that particularly excite you around that?
It is quite advantageous. We can mix both images and characters as passwords. It is easy to manage the relation between accounts and the corresponding passwords. It is comfortable and it can also be fun. Complex text passwords are not easy to remember and are often reused as login credentials of multiple accounts. Those are easily cracked by automated programmatic guessing. Episodic memory-based graphical passwords, on the other hand, are more robust and secure than the text passwords. Moreover, episodic memory are relatively easy to remember. That is why those episodic memory based questions are securely used as second layers to protect accounts. The password strings can be increased by using multiple images from a matrix of images. If biometric data are hacked, it is gone forever because biometrics cannot be reset, but graphical passwords or pass images can be reset easily. The entropy of graphical passwords are higher than the text passwords. That is why the graphical passwords cannot be cracked by automatic programmatic guessing.
And it seems here in 2019, almost daily, LinkedIn timelines, our news feeds are all featuring stories on an almost daily basis about privacy, digital identity, killing passwords, facial recognition, and biometrics, and the list goes on and on. But for someone that's working in the heart of this space and reading all these stories, what do you think we can expect that will happen next with digital identity?
Now, digital identity is everywhere because we need it very much in the cybersphere for accessing our online accounts, banking transactions, and all types of online processing. The future of digital identity is very complex. Although we are talking about self-sovereign identity nowadays, but its future depends on the policies of the national governments. It is not feasible unless the laws of the national governments are modified suitably. Moreover, if the biometric data are already stolen or hacked, the identity data are already in the hands of cyber criminals. So, creating a self-sovereign identity doesn't make any sense to me. As for example, the entire biometric database of Indian identity project Aadhaar leaked and are available in the dark market for a small amount of Indian rupees. Does it matter if the digital identity data of the Indian citizens are secured by a new, more secure digital identity project? I think we need to find out a more innovative and robust way to secure our cyber identity. Technology alone cannot help unless we consider cyber security seriously. We must remember that convenience has no space in cybersecurity.
Fantastic. Well, it's a huge pleasure to have you back on the show again. There's so many news stories around these topics every single day, and it's great to get an expert on and offer how they see the world too. So for anyone that would love to stay in touch with you or learn more about your work and the kind of things that you're learning and talking about out there in the online community, what's the best way for listeners to contact you or visit your web presence? Can you point them in the right direction of that?
Oh yes, contact me through the LinkedIn profile by sending a direct LinkedIn message or email. Since we haven't started a business page for this matter, so we request the listeners to join our LinkedIn group, Identity Crisis, the Future of Password Security, to get updates about the future of episodic memory-based password security systems and beyond. For further reading, an overview of episodic memory-based authentication can be found in a recent research article entitled Digital Identity and Our Remembrance, published in the EDP Audit Control and Security Newsletter, Volume 60, 2019, or a more detailed science-based research paper entitled Using Episodic Memory for User Authentication, published in ACM Transactions on Privacy and Security, Volume 22, 2019.
Well, I'll add all those links to the blog post that will accompany this podcast episode over on my website, techblogwriter.co.uk. So anyone listening can go to podcast or find links to all the episodes, find this one, and there'll be links to all those articles in there. And there is some fantastic highlights to read from there. So I hope you check that out. But more than anything, Debesh, a big thank you for coming on and joining me today, sharing your insights, and hopefully we'll get you on again next year and not leave it too long before we speak again. But a huge thanks as always for taking the time.
Thank you very much. Thanks.
Secret credentials are indispensable in this internet-driven life that we all lead now. And yes, text, passwords, PINs are still the most used form of secret credentials. And biometrics are being promoted for authenticating digital identity of humans with those text passwords and PIN as the fallback system. But some argue that text passwords seem insufficient but not harmful, and biometrics is not sufficient and appears to be harmful in terms of data breach and stealing-induced spoofing. So the big question is, what can be a viable solution in this kind of crisis situation? I think Debesh has done a fantastic job with sharing his insights, his expertise. But again, I want to pass the microphone over to you now. What are your thoughts on this? So keep those questions, virtual voicemails, or requests to come on this show in 2020 by emailing me directly at techblogwriter@outlook.com or send me a cheeky tweet at Neil C. Hughes. So a huge thanks for tuning in. Thanks for making this podcast exactly what it is. Keep doing what you're doing because you guys are the real star of the show. So thanks for listening. And until next time, don't be a stranger.
Thank you for listening to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast with Neil C. Hughes. Remember, technology works best when it brings people together.